South Korean President Yoon is heading to San Francisco for high-stakes meetings with APEC leaders on supply chains and North Korean-Russia military ties. Eyes are on whether he'll also get to meet with Chinese leader Xi Jinping. North Korea says it has successfully tested solid-fuel engines for a new type of intermediate-range ballistic missile. Over in San Francisco, top diplomats of South Korea, the U.S., and Japan discussed joint action against growing Pyongyang-Moscow cooperation. Israeli forces entered al-Shifa hospitals in Gaza in what it calls a targeted operation against Hamas, where thousands of Palestinians are reported to be sheltering. It's November 15, 2023. This is News Center. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Min. South Korean President Yoon is heading to San Francisco for high-stakes meetings with APEC leaders on trade, supply chains, and North Korea-Russia military ties. He could also sit down with Chinese leader Xi Jinping. Presidential Office correspondent Kim Do-yeon starts our coverage.
Amid crises and challenges, from the conflict between Israel and Hamas and the war in Ukraine to climate change and supply chain disruptions, President Yoon embarks on a mission to boost South Korea's status as a global pivotal state as he heads on Wednesday to San Francisco for the APEC summit.
저는 세계 GDP의 60% 이상을 차지하는 회원국의 정상들이 한데 모이는 이번 회의에서 공급망 다변화와 무역 투자 확대와 같이 우리 경제에 실질적으로 보탬이 되는 협력 방안을 논의할 것입니다.
As soon as he lands, before he starts his official diplomatic events, he's set to meet over lunch with local Koreans and people of Korean descent, a customary schedule that he has kept for most of his overseas trips. His first event related to the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation is the APEC CEO Summit, a business forum run by the chairing country, the U.S. At that summit, Yoon will give a keynote speech. He then will attend a reception for the leaders and end his first day in San Francisco by meeting young leaders in technology. The official working sessions for APEC will start on Thursday under the theme of creating a resilient and sustainable future for all. Laying out South Korea's role in global cooperation, Yoon will attend the meetings and offer support to countries vulnerable to climate change. He'll also emphasize the need for multilateral efforts to strengthen supply chains and establish digital ethical standards amid the rapid evolution of artificial intelligence. Amid a series of APEC meetings, Yoon's sideline meetings with other leaders are also noteworthy. First, he's set to attend a summit of the U.S.-led Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, also known as IPEF. He's also set to meet his Japanese counterpart Fumio Kishida and jointly deliver a speech at Stanford University. With a sideline summit between U.S. President Joe Biden and China's Xi Jinping, there is also a possibility that a sideline meeting between Yoon and Xi could happen. In terms of regional security, President Yoon has said that during the APEC summit, he will bring up the arms exchanges between North Korea and Russia to emphasize what this really means to global security. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Also in San Francisco, top diplomats from Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo have met and talked about their three-way cooperation in many areas. One of those include addressing military cooperation between Russia and North Korea. Our foreign affairs correspondent Pei Eun-ji has the story.
South Korea's Foreign Minister Park Jin met with his U.S. and Japanese counterparts in San Francisco on Tuesday local time and stressed the importance of trilateral cooperation.
The rules-based international order is facing multiple challenges in this poly-crisis era. Strengthening cooperation among like-minded countries is more important than ever, which is why the three of us are here.
He added that the three countries' national security advisors are expected to meet at the inaugural Indo-Pacific Dialogue. Japan's foreign minister also said Tokyo seeks to work together with Seoul and Washington, as the global challenges they face demand a higher level of strategic coordination.
I would like to work together with both of you to uphold the free and open international order based on the rule of law, as well as to aim for a world caring for human dignity.
And the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said there's much work to do.
But events in the Middle East, shared economic cooperation, shared growth, addressing the security implications of the DPRK, Russia military cooperation, and a number of regional and global issues, including our ongoing support for Ukraine. These and more are on our agenda together.
During Tuesday's meeting, Seoul's foreign ministry said the three officials decided to closely cooperate to respond to the military ties between North Korea and Russia, a matter that they agreed is a serious threat to the Korean peninsula, as well as international peace and security. Pyongyang is believed to have provided Moscow with weapons and ammunition to use in Russia's war against Ukraine, in exchange for technology for its nuclear and missile programs. As for the situation in the Middle East, the three officials condemned the Hamas militant group's attack on Israel and called for an immediate release of hostages. They also agreed to work together to resolve the humanitarian crisis in the region. Peun's Arirang News.
North Korea says it has successfully tested new solid-fuel engines for a new type of intermediate-range ballistic missile, which could signify another missile test in the near future. North Korean Affairs correspondent Kim Jong-sil explains.
North Korea's state-run KCNA reported on Wednesday that the North had successfully conducted hot-fire tests of, quote, new types of high-thrust, solid propellant engines for intermediate-range ballistic missiles. It said the first stage engine's hot-fire test was conducted on November 11th and the second stage tested on November 14th. Until now, North Korean IRBM technology was based on using liquid propellants. Military experts say solid-fueled missiles, though, allow greater maneuverability and stealth before launch, which is why experts warn that it will be harder to detect and prepare for an attack by missiles that use this type of propellant.
I have to say that solid propellant got a very good response. So it did not take a time to prepare for the attack. It did take less than 5 minutes comparing to liquid. That is going to be a problem. That means we cannot have enough time to be able to, prepare for any attack from North Korea.
The KCNA also added that the test provided a guarantee for reliably accelerating the development of the new type IRBM system. North Korea's General Missile Bureau put great significance on the new IRBM, saying the recent tests were a necessary process to enhance the strategic offensive capabilities of the North Korean military in the, quote, grave and unstable security environment and against the vicious military collusion by its enemies. Professor Chang added that the South Korean military would be aware of this situation and would be looking for a solution. Other experts also said that to detect missiles in advance, space assets such as satellites are necessary, which are extremely costly, and perhaps even they might not be enough. Kim Jong-sil, Arirang News.
South Korea and the U.S. today held a combined aerial exercise involving the American Air Force's B-52H strategic bombers in their latest show of force against North Korea. Seoul's Defense Ministry says the joint drill was conducted over waters off South Korea's west coast. South Korea's F-35A and F-15K fighters, as well as the U.S. F-35B and F-16s, also took part. This was the 12th time this year that the Allies have held this kind of joint drill, and the first time in about a month that Washington has sent its B-52 bombers to Korea. Next week, a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, the USS Carl Vinson, is expected to dock at the Busan Naval Base. U.S. Defense Chief Lloyd Austin has earlier highlighted that the deployment of strategic assets to South Korea in recent months demonstrates Washington's commitment to extended deterrence. The U.S. and China agreed to relaunch a working group on climate cooperation ahead of a bilateral summit between the leaders of the two countries at the COP28 summit later this month. In a joint statement released on Wednesday, they've pledged to work closely on methane and plastic pollution to tackle the climate crisis. This followed talks between U.S. and Chinese climate envoys John Kerry and Shi Jinhua at Sunnylands in California. The revival of the working group would mark the normalization of the climate relationship between Washington and Beijing, following a hiatus after the U.S. House of Representative Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan in August last year. On the local front, employment continued to expand in October, but the discrepancy in employment numbers between those in their 60s and those in their teens and 20s was more pronounced. Park Go-nu explains.
South Korea's employment figures rose in October for the third consecutive month. According to Statistics Korea on Wednesday, 346,000 jobs were added on year last month, with the employment rate seeing its biggest jump for any October at 63.3%. This was also the largest addition since May last year. By industry, employment numbers in the wholesale and retail sectors saw a jump of over 10,000, increasing for the first time in 53 months. Figures have been sliding due to structural changes within the industry, such as automated sales points, but numbers surged last month thanks to a tourism boost during the long holiday period in October. Other sectors, including health and social welfare, IT, and accommodation and restaurants, all saw increases in October. But the manufacturing sector, especially electronic components and machinery, saw employment figures drop by 77,000, with the base effect from the 200,000 jobs created the year before a contributing factor. By age, there were over 336,000 workers aged 60 and above compared to the month before, while employment figures for young adults aged 15 to 29 decreased by over 80,000. During an emergency economic ministerial meeting held on Wednesday, the government announced measures to boost employment and encourage young adults to find jobs.
The government will strengthen early support for young adults at each step of school, work and job hunting so that they can find the jobs they want.
The solutions include increases in internship programs for students, counseling for young adults who have just started working, and incentives and consultations for job hunters. Park Go-nu, Arirang News.
Plans are in the works to better support Korea's shipbuilding industry with substantial financial investments amid calls for green transition and more. Business correspondent Moon Tae-ryun reports.
South Korea is ramping up efforts to boost its shipbuilding sector as it seeks to dominate the global market. During an emergency economic meeting on Wednesday, the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy announced that the government will invest around 710 billion Korean won, roughly $544 million in the industry over the next 5 years. The sector makes up around 3% of total manufacturing and exports. Since 2017, South Korea has had a global market share of around 30%, and in October reached its highest order backlog since 2011. While the government says the industry is expected to keep growing, it faces many threats, including a workforce deficit, China's growing shipbuilding industry, and the International Maritime Organization's goal of reducing greenhouse gases and carbon footprint. These problems are set to be tackled in 3 different ways: developing future technology, systemizing the manufacturing process, and in modifying regulations. The government will inject 200 billion won into the commercialization of non-carbon-based fuels, such as liquefied natural gas, ammonia, and hydrogen for use in ships. The southeastern port city of Ulsan will have an area dedicated to supplying eco-friendly fuel and will supply more than a quarter of the fuel demand of domestic ships. The Minister of Oceans and Fisheries stressed the importance of this plan.
Global shipping companies are undergoing large-scale conversions to eco-friendly ships, and the availability of eco-friendly fuel at ports will be necessary for port competitiveness in the future.
A further 150 billion won will be spent on digitalizing and automating the manufacturing process, as well as the employment of 3,000 more workers every year to tackle labor shortages. Revamping the visa policy and increasing quotas for foreign workers, as well as establishing programs to help them adjust to life in South Korea, are also among the solutions proposed. The country's finance minister, Chu Kyung-ho, added that the government will be providing small to medium-sized companies with additional support, such as incentives for going green and incorporating digital technology. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
The Israeli military raided Gaza's al-Shifa hospital early Wednesday morning, which it deems as a Hamas command center. Thousands of Palestinians are reported to be sheltering in the medical complex. Choi Min-jung has more.
Israeli forces have reportedly stormed Gaza's largest medical facility, the al-Shifa hospital. The Israeli military said early Wednesday that it had carried out a raid against Hamas militants there. The general director of hospitals in Gaza said that Israeli forces searched the basement and entered the surgical and emergency buildings, shooting and carrying out bombings. The director general of the Gaza Health Ministry also said there were big explosions, which were believed to have occurred inside the hospital. According to the Gaza Health Ministry, an estimated 650 patients remain in the hospital, with thousands sheltered in the medical complex. A Hamas media officer criticized the raid.
Netanyahu and his defeated army's attempt to portray the incursion of their tanks to Shifa Hospital as if it were some kind of achievement is political immaturity and an exposed theatrical move which won't work on anyone and will not be believed by anyone.
Israel's attack on al-Shifa started hours after the White House said it had intelligence indicating that Hamas is using the hospital to run its military operations. Hamas denied the claims.
Shifa is a medical and civilian building and not a military site. The attempts by Netanyahu and his army to portray this as an achievement or a victory only show their failure and panic in the depth of their defeat.
Due to the ongoing war, the hospital is out of fuel and patients are no longer being fed. As a result, hospital officials are planning to bury more than 100 bodies, but worry that there won't be enough space. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
Korea is counting down one day to its annual college scholastic ability test, also known as Suneung here in the country, for more than 500,000 students. Yoon goes over some of the things to consider ahead of the big day tomorrow.
On Wednesday, some 504,588 students preparing to take the annual college admissions exam can visit their test site and confirm their elective test subjects. The exam, that is seen as deciding students' futures, will be conducted on Thursday across 1,279 test centers, which are normally designated high schools or middle schools. According to the Ministry of Education, not only is there a significant decrease in the number of registered test takers this year at 3,442 less than last year, but only 64.7% of the test takers are high school seniors. Rather, 31.7% are retaking the exam, marking the highest proportion of retakes in 28 years. The testing centers will open at 6:30 a.m. on Thursday, and students can enter until 10 minutes past 8 a.m. This is the fourth Suneung exam since the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, but the first where no virus prevention rules will be implemented, and all students at a venue will be taking the exam in the same room. But the Education Ministry has recommended that anyone confirmed to have the virus should wear a K94 mask, and anyone with symptoms should wear a K80 mask. The ministry added that test takers who have the virus should eat lunch in a separate area. All test takers must enter their designated testing centers with their exam identification slip and official form of identification. To avoid confusion or mishaps on the morning of the exam, students are strongly recommended to check the location of their test center on the previous day. The only items that students are allowed to bring into the exam are black computer marking pens, white correction tape, a black mechanical pencil and extra .5mm lead, and an eraser. Those that wish to use a watch may wear an analog watch that doesn't have a Bluetooth function, including communication and payment functions, and doesn't have an LCD or LED display. And all electronic devices are prohibited. This includes all mobile phones, smart devices, earphones with Bluetooth functions, electronic dictionaries or calculators, as well as electronic cigarettes. With just one day left until the Suneung exam, students are recommended to limit consumption of caffeinated drinks and to get a good night's sleep to be in their best condition. Yoon, Arirang News.
This week, the South Korean capital city is hosting this year's Global Korean Politicians Forum, bringing together ethnically Korean politicians from around the world. On this occasion, our political correspondent Lee Si-hoo sat down with Lieutenant Governor Sylvia Luke of Hawaii, who shared her own story as the first Korean American to hold that post.
The story of their origin is what unites ethnically Korean politicians overseas. At the 9th Global Korean Politicians Forum being held in Seoul, Sylvia Luke, the Lieutenant Governor of Hawaii and the first Korean American to hold a U.S. statewide office, shared her story.
Our origin stories are very similar about our experiences, some of the challenges we have in our current country. But in order to build this bridge with Korea and to come back and have a connection with each other, this is such a wonderful opportunity.
Born in Seoul, Luke immigrated with her family to Honolulu as a child.
I immigrated from Korea when I was 9 years old, back in 1977. And even back then, my mother, in her struggle to raise a family and to care for her family, she always took time out in her own schedule to care for people at the church or to care for other individuals who are sick at the church. And so growing up, we always felt that there were always people who were less fortunate than us and who needed help.
The immigrant background is what drives these politicians.
If you look at even our immigration story, 120 years ago, Koreans from Incheon left Korea to work in sugarcane fields in Hawaii, and that was 120 years ago. And those individuals who worked so hard, they sent part of their earnings back to Korea to help create a university, and that's the Inhwa University, which stands for Incheon and Hawaii. That tells you how Koreans and a lot of Korean families really value education and want to help the next generation succeed.
Lieutenant Governor Luke carried out the initial response when wildfires broke out in Hawaii in August while the governor was out of town. During the response and the impact afterwards, South Korea showed great support.
Korean government was the first country to respond to the Maui fires. In fact, the Consul General called Mr. Park Jin-hye, the MOFA Minister of Foreign Affairs, and said, U.S. is always there when Korea needs help. And now we're at a point where South Korean government should be there for humanitarian efforts when other countries, other allies need help. And within a couple of weeks, South Korean government provided $2 million in humanitarian aid to the people of Maui. No other countries came up as fast as South Korea. And I can't thank South Korea enough for the generosity and the love that it showed for the people of Maui.
And she looks forward to further connections on the 120th anniversary of immigration from Korea to the United States and beyond.
We have a lot of things that we can gain from other challenges and other things that we have dealt with. So I look forward to continuing to connect with the South Korean government and its people.
Lee Si-hoo, Arirang News.
Tomorrow is a big day for all the high school seniors in South Korea. For the National College Entrance Exam Day, also known as Suneung Day, overall temperatures will be mild. No major cold is in the forecast, with temperatures in the positive range for most regions. For Seoul, readings will be hovering around 6 to 8 degrees Celsius, but there are some concerns of occasional showers, with a few rain clouds moving in starting tomorrow morning. Rain clouds are currently clustered across western parts of the country. By tomorrow daytime, the entire nation will be under the influence of the rain system. As for the amount of rainfall, 전라도 province and Jeju Island will see 10 to 30. The Seoul metropolitan area and Chungcheongdo provinces will see 5 to 30. The surrounding regions, including Gangwon-do and Gyeongsang-buk-do provinces, will see 5 to 20 millimeters. Morning temperatures in Seoul will be starting off at 6 degrees Celsius. Rain will have spread nationwide by the daytime. Highs in Seoul will peak at 8 degrees, Gwangju 11, Busan will be reaching 16 degrees. On Friday, the entire nation will see a mix of rain or snowfall. By this weekend, clear skies will make a return here in Seoul. That's all for now, and to the weather conditions around the world.
That is News Center for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session coming up.
Welcome.
엄청난 에너지를 춤으로 뿜어내는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
한국에 오면 먹어야죠.
먹어도 끝이 없는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
Children's laughter, hope, dream, K animation belongs in them. Interesting and valuable story that transcends between everyday life and dream. Surprising spectacle where imagination becomes real. An array of subjects catering from infants to adolescents. For our story to reach all corners of the world. K animation makes healthy laughter for children.
한국에 오면 먹어야죠. 먹어도 끝이 없는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? 웰컴. 엄청난 에너지를 춤으로 뿜어내는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
Hello everyone, it's Wednesday and you're watching Within the Frame. I'm Kim Bo-kyung. North Korea announced that it successfully carried out ground tests of solid fuel engines to power new intermediate-range ballistic missiles. These tests coincided with a week that's packed with major defense-related events, as a trilateral meeting between defense chiefs of Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo took place on Sunday, followed by the Security Consultative Meeting and the inaugural Defense Ministerial Meeting of UN Command member states. The most noteworthy is the 55th edition of SCM, where South Korean and U.S. defense chiefs updated their tailored deterrence strategy and announced a new defense vision, upgraded for the first time in 4 years. What are the details and how did the experts see such a series of events? For this, we have invited Dr. Go Myung-hyun, a senior fellow from the Asan Institute for Policy Studies. Dr. Go, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being with us. And we also have Professor Brian Meyers from Dongsa University. Good to have you with us, Professor Meyers.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being with us. Now, first question to our Dr. Go. So, North Korea conducted ground tests of solid fuel engines to power a new IRBM. The first stage engine test was on Saturday and the second was on Tuesday. Could you tell us details on this?
So the recent test is actually quite significant on two levels. First is the timing. North Korea is trying to send a message, as always, to Seoul and Washington that it's, despite whatever Seoul and Washington agree on, or especially the message of strengthening deterrence against North Korea soldiers on, further developing its missile capability by this time around showing that he has a new type of rocket engine, which is pretty impressive, given that North Korea has already developed dozens of different types of missiles ranging from short range, medium range, intermediate range, and the intercontinental range missiles. And the technical significance, which is the second part of this recent test, is that North Korea has achieved a higher level of engine technology, which is a solid fuel engine technology, but they have deployed this engine technology to a limited number of missile models. And then before, North Korea only had short-range ballistic missiles with KN-23 and 24 with a solid fuel rocket engine, and then had one type of a medium-range ballistic missile with the same engine technology. And finally, among the three different types of ICBM North Korea possesses, only one model, Hwasong-18, had a solid fuel engine, solid fuel rocket engine. So this time, North Korea essentially has added another segment, the intermediate range, and then this model now carries a solid fuel rocket engine. So in that sense, I think North Korea can demonstrate that it has deployed, or is in the process of deploying, the more cutting-edge rocket engine technology that has the capability to shorten the preparation time for launch, which compounds the difficulties that the alliance faces in targeting and tracking North Korean missiles. So in that sense, I think this represents a heightened level of threat, and at the same time, a signal to southern Washington that North Korea is not scared by the recent statement that was issued jointly between the Defense Minister of South Korea and the Defense Minister of the United States.
Right, I see. So it was basically trying to send a message, and we could see technical advances regarding rocket engine technology. I see, Dr. Go. Well, Professor Meyers, like I said before, the timing coincided with the annual security talks between Defense Minister Shin Won-sik and his U.S. counterpart at the 55th Security Consultative Meeting. Let's tap into the specifics of the joint statement. The two countries agreed to expand cooperation through a shared early warning system. What is this, and how would this help to deal with North Korea's threats?
Well, not to get too technical, it's a global missile defense system which uses all kinds of different sensors and satellites, radar sensors, infrared, optical, and so on, to detect when a missile is being launched and to figure out where it's going, what the probable trajectory is. And the idea is that by sharing this information with its allies, the U.S. can give them time to prepare for a potential attack. And that in turn is supposed to discourage adversarial states like North Korea from launching attacks, because it raises the likelihood of a punitive counterstrike. But, the big question really is how effective such a system would be in protecting South Korea, and especially the main metropolis of Seoul, which is virtually on the border with North Korea. Dr. Go was just talking about the solid fuel engine technology, which would make it harder to get advance notice of a strike in time. And a missile launched directly at Seoul would hit home in a matter of minutes. So while this early warning system is certainly better than nothing, the benefits of it shouldn't be overstated either.
Right, I see. So we'd have to think about its effectiveness, I guess. Well, Dr. Go, one more notable thing was that the two defense leaders signed the revised document of the Tailored Deterrence Strategy, or so-called TDS, marking the first update since it was adopted in 2013. What was this document about, and why did it need an update?
So this is essentially a reaffirmation of the U.S. commitment to defend South Korea with the full range of its military capabilities, ranging from nuclear to conventional, and including the missile defense system. So the reason why it's called tailored deterrence strategy is because it's showing that the United States is taking into consideration the advancements in North Korea's nuclear capability in this case, that the United States essentially has an adaptable deterrence strategy. So the core of this element is really detailing or outlining what the United States is going to put on the table to defend South Korea. So, but then at the same time, there's enough ambiguity, and the ambiguity in this case is intended on the part of the United States not to scare off North Korea too much. After all, the United States has absolute military advantage over North Korea, despite the seriousness of North Korea's threat. So if you compare the Tailored Deterrence Strategy document of 2013 that was first signed, as you mentioned, 10 years ago, and today's, so there isn't much of a difference, given that this document is really about commitment rather than detailing too specifically what the United States is going to do. But then there's one interesting change, which is whereas in 10 years ago, United States used the term nuclear umbrella to denote United States nuclear capability to deter North Korea. Nuclear umbrella has more of a defensive meaning than offensive. This time around, United States has used the term nuclear capability, which includes both defensive and offensive capabilities. So in that sense, I think it represents a more of a proactive or active stance against North Korea's nuclear threat. So this is fits the assurance part of deterrence, assurance part of a U.S. defense commitment. So in that sense, this reflects the recent changes that has taken place this year, especially not recent, but this year between United States and South Korea, in which the United States raised the level of assurance and deterrence, both assurance and deterrence, on North Korea's nuclear threat. So the assurance component is clearly the United States being more proactive and specific about using its nuclear capability to defend South Korea. So I think this is reflected now in 2023's version of the Tailored Deterrence Strategy document.
All right, I see. Well, I'd like to ask our Professor Meyers' opinion as well on this revised document. Though the details are unknown because of its confidentiality, what do you expect the revision might have been, in your opinion?
Well, I think, most of the answer to that question has already been given by Dr. Go. The revisions are likely to bolster South Korea's sense of being a more equal partner, so there'll be more emphasis on South Korea's military capabilities, and there'll be, as Dr. Go said, some expression of America's readiness to bring all possible assets to bear, conventional and nuclear, when defending South Korea. But I think we should also keep in mind what this revision is not going to entail, namely the nuclear sharing with the United States that the Yoon administration made a somewhat vague claim to having achieved earlier this year. The Americans have made very clear that nuclear sharing is just not going to happen. So the Yoon administration and ruling party are, of course, emphasizing the equality reflected in all this joint rhetoric between the two defense ministers, while the opposition party and the opposition media are in effect telling voters that South Korea has become perhaps less sovereign, more subservient to the United States since President Yoon took over. As you say, the details of the revision are not going to be made public, but I guess the truth is somewhere between those accounts.
All right, I see. It's quite interesting to hear that it is quite notable to see the nuclear steering part would not have been included. Well, Dr. Go, apart from the joint statement, a separate document, the defense vision of the ROK-US alliance, was issued as well. What did this document include?
So this document is not really a separate document from other documents reaffirming U.S. commitment to defend South Korea. So we have to understand this is more about celebrating the 70 years of the alliance between the two countries. But this document is clearly more specifically focused on the defense part of the alliance, or military part. So in that sense, it's about recapping the history of the U.S. defense commitment to defend South Korea, which underlies the alliance itself, and then also outlining the vision for the defense cooperation between the two countries. So it's broadly similar to the joint statements that the United States and South Korea issued throughout this year, the summit, as well as other communiques. Having said that, though, I think fundamentally the message here is one of continuity. I think the United States wants to emphasize this part, especially, even though it sounds boring, it's all repetitive even. Continuity is very important right now because one elephant in the room, I would say, is the political changes that could take place either both in Seoul and Washington next year. There are major elections taking place. In case of South Korea, it's general elections that elects the members to the National Assembly, and there's a presidential election in the United States. And each one of these events could represent a break in the policy coordination between Seoul and Washington. So I think this document has its significance in the sense that it highlights the continuity and also outlines the vision of what alliance can be in the future. It's essentially about the alliance being more global, more comprehensive. And in that sense, it's not really new, but at the same time, it's really heartening to see this, to see the evolution of the military cooperation, defense cooperation between Seoul and Washington.
All right, I see. So it was more about celebrating 70th anniversary of bilateral alliance. But Professor Meyers, as far as I know, this is the first time a defense vision has been issued since the 2010 Lee Myung-bak administration, and again in November 2019 during the Moon Jae-in administration. How is the current document different from previous ones, and how did you see the significance of it?
Well, of course, it's different in tone from the Moon administration's version in 2019 in that it places more emphasis on strengthening deterrence of potential North Korean aggression and on cooperating militarily with like-minded countries. Other aspects, I think, like the need to modernize the military, are more in the tradition of what the Moon administration had called for as well. As Dr. Go says, there's a good deal of continuity here. Generally speaking, I think this this version has a more hardline or security conscious ring to it, especially when compared to the 2019 version, which had more talk of peace and prosperity on the peninsula. And I think a similar change can be seen in the rhetoric that the two defense ministers engaged in. Defense Minister Shin, in particular, said that if North Korea provokes a war, that will be the end of North Korea. This is the sort of hardline rhetoric that the Moon administration was very careful to avoid for 5 years. But on the other hand, the defense vision statement is pretty short on concrete specifics. Dr. Go just mentioned the election next year. And here the parliamentary elections. And one of the reasons why President Yoon's approval ratings have been stagnating is because conservatives here really question the rhetoric of some of his security talk. They question the sincerity of it. And his party now seems to be moving slightly to the left in advance of parliamentary elections. So I wouldn't overestimate the differences between this defense vision and the one that was put out in 2019.
Right, I see your point. Well, Dr. Go, one more thing that was discussed during SCM, the possible suspension of the September 19th Inter-Korean Military Agreement signed in 2018 under the previous Moon Jae-in administration was also discussed. And Defense Minister Shin Won-sik had been keep pushing to suspend this agreement, and they decided to continue this talk. What is Washington's position on this, and do you believe this is going to be eventually suspended?
So clearly, the problem with the September 19th military agreement is the fact that it reflects many of the demands posed by North Korea to South Korea for many decades. North Korea had accused historically of South Korea of fomenting tension along the DMZ, the demilitarized zone that separates the two Koreas, and then characterized South Korea's defense measures such as establishing no-fly zones and setting up guard towers along the DMZ as hostile actions against the North, which is a mischaracterization. But then the Moon Jae-in administration that had signed this agreement with the North essentially reflected the North Koreans' perspective on this issue rather than South Korea's own militarist perspective. And in fact, when this agreement was signed in fact, Washington was pretty upset about it because much of the agreement was actually carried out without prior consultation with the United States. So in that sense, the baseline position of the United States regarding this agreement is one of, I would say, negativity. I would say disagrees with much of the elements of it. But at the same time, though, I think the United States government is concerned about the timing of cancellation of this agreement when things are relatively stable in the Korean Peninsula compared to elsewhere in the world. I think United States is, there's a trend on the part of the United States government when it comes to approaching South Korean security situation, which is putting the priority on stability rather than rectifying adverse security situations such as this agreement. And this means that I think the U.S. government is at the baseline level, even though it disagrees with the content of the agreement, at the same time doesn't want to rock the boat at this juncture when the U.S. government is as full plate regarding other issues and tensions in the Middle East, obviously the war in Ukraine and then tensions in China. These are all elements that are distracting the United States away from the Korean Peninsula. So in that sense, I think U.S. government would like to see closer, I would say, discussion and with the South Korean government before the South Korean government proceeds with modifying, even outright canceling this agreement.
All right, more discussion to follow. Well, Professor Meyers, meanwhile, just a day before the SCM, defense chiefs of Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo had a meeting, and there they agreed to launch a real-time missile warning data sharing system next month. And they also are expected to expand the joint training into a wide variety of other areas as well. How did you see such measures, and in what ways do you believe such measures would be able to boost the trilateral cooperation?
Well, I think the main aspect to emphasize is the trilateral nature of what they're planning. So to take the data sharing system, instead of South Korean data having to go through the U.S. to Japan or Japanese data having to go through the U.S. to South Korea, all relevant data would be shared in real time between the three partners, the three security partners. And this would have obvious benefits for all three, each of which is in a position to learn things that the other two might not be aware of. But I think the symbolic significance is at least as important as the substance, because this kind of activity is going to get the South Korean public used to working with Japan on the security front. And at least that's what Washington hopes will be the effect. I think there's a strong likelihood that trilateral cooperation will end almost as soon as the nationalist left returns to power here, if it does return to power. Many South Koreans, as you know, are deeply uneasy about cooperating militarily with Japan in a united front against North Korea. So it remains to be seen whether this data sharing system has the sort of staying power that the Americans want it to have.
All right, I see. Well, Professor Meyers, I'd like to ask you one more question. I'd like to also talk about the meeting between defense chiefs of South Korea and 17 member states of the United Nations Command. What significance does this meeting have, and what was mainly discussed?
Well, let's remember that the previous South Korean administration, the Moon Jae-in government, was very keen on signing an end-of-war agreement or even a peace treaty with North Korea, which would naturally have led to the dissolution of the UN command. So during Moon Jae-in's term, many people here in South Korea and overseas, in the United States especially, worried that the mutual commitment of the UN command and South Korea to each other was under threat, was wavering in some way. So as I see it, the meeting on Tuesday was aimed in large part at reassuring both the world community and the domestic public here that the UN command will continue safeguarding South Korea's security. Of course, the UN cemetery for the soldiers killed in the Korean War is located here in Busan, where I am now. And there have been a few events here this week emphasizing the UN command's importance to South Korea. So this is an issue that conservatives here in particular really care a lot about.
All right, I see. So it was to reassure people that UN command is going to be there. Well, Dr. Go, South Korea is reportedly in talks with the UN command for its military to take more responsibility for the unit's staff. How is this discussion developing right now, and why are they trying to bolster the multinational command's presence?
I think it's all part of the revitalization of the United Nations Command. United Nations Command is kind of plays a second fiddle to the combined forces command between the South Korean military and the United States forces in Korea. But then, even though the commander of the United Nations Command is the same as the commander of the Combined Forces Command, which is the commander of the United States forces in Korea. So the reason why there are these dual hats and commandancy for the commander of the U.S. forces in South Korea is because of the United Nations' very first mandate to send troops to defend South Korea against North Korean aggression back in 1950. So that's the reason why many have claimed that, especially North Korea, and then those people who side with the North Korean argument, that the United Nations Command is an artifact of the past or like a remnant of the Cold War. Despite its history, United Nations Command serves a very important function of coordinating intervention and cooperation of the 17 original United Nations member states that sent troops to defend South Korea back in 1950. So, and then given that the tension with North Korea remains in place despite the 70 years of history, it means that in case of a contingency in the Korean Peninsula, United Nations Command, just as the Combined Forces Command, will have a very important role in defending South Korea against North Korean aggression. So in that sense, I think the South Korean government is aware of the necessity to revitalize the United Nations Command, because this is really a part of the comprehensiveness and the global nature of the alliance that both Seoul and Washington want the alliance to be. And that means more cooperation with the like-minded states around the world. So, and then one mechanism to this is clearly the UNC, the United Nations Command, and therein lies the motivation behind the current South Korean government to revitalize it.
All right, I see. Well, thank you, Dr. Go, for explaining for us why South Korean government is trying to, like you said, revitalize the multinational command's presence in South Korea. All right, well, unfortunately, this is all the time we have for today's edition. Thank you, Dr. Go and Professor Meyers, for your time and insights. We really appreciate it.
Always my pleasure.
Thank you. That's all for Within the Frame tonight. We'll be back tomorrow with more in-depth stories. Thank you for watching and goodbye.
하나, 둘, 셋.
Hey, Mr. Cupid, look my way. Make sure you listen to what I say. I may be stupid,